You didn't stumble here. You were summoned by something that doesn't use words or roads, a pulse older than memory. Out of billions of flickering signals crossing the digital sky, this one struck your consciousness like a comet finding its orbit. That's not coincidence. That's convergence. You can feel it, can't you? The subtle voltage in your chest, the static before revelation. It's as if the air itself is charged with the knowing that something has already begun. You're standing at the seam between what was and what is becoming. And even if your rational mind calls it chance, your deeper intelligence recognizes pattern the moment a timeline folds back to greet itself. Most people keep scrolling when this threshold appears. But you paused. That pause was the ignition. In that silence, your awareness whispered, "I'm ready." And the field, call it quantum, call it divine, call it consciousness itself, answered back. Everything that follows is not about learning new truths, but remembering ancient ones coded in your own biology. The leap isn't forward in time, it's inward in perception. The particles of your being are reorganizing to reflect the realization that you are not merely inside reality. Reality is inside you. So breathe. This moment is alive, listening, waiting for your recognition to complete the circuit. The activation isn't approaching, it's happening. Each heartbeat is a transmission, each thought a ripple through invisible architecture. You have crossed the threshold. And from this instant onward, the universe doesn't just surround you, it responds to you. The air still hums from that recognition, that invisible doorway you just stepped through. But let's look closer at what actually happened in that instant of arrival. Imagine billions of digital fragments racing through the void, each second data. Words, algorithms, images all swirling in the endless electric bloodstream of the modern world. Among them, this particular signal found you, not by marketing, not by luck, but by resonance. Like two tuning forks vibrating in sympathy across vast distance. Your consciousness and this frequency aligned for one precise moment, and reality reorganized to make that meeting possible. From a scientific view, we might call it probability collapse. From a mystical view, divine timing. Either way, something in your awareness recognized a match, and that recognition set off a chain reaction far beyond mere chance. Your attention became the spark that collapsed infinite digital possibilities into one singular experience, this one. The very act of noticing created the event itself. You see, in the quantum world, observation isn't passive. To observe is to participate. It's as if the universe had been waiting for your gaze to complete its equation. Before you arrived, these words were only potential dormant waveforms encoded in invisible servers. The instant your awareness met them, the waveform collapsed into matter, into meaning, into you reading this now. Notice the intimacy of that. It's not technology, it's entanglement. Consciousness reaching across the web of light to find itself reflected in another pattern. Every click, every breath you take while absorbing this message sends electromagnetic ripples through the matrix of your own biofield. You are literally shaping the event that's shaping you. And yet, we're trained to think it's random. We scroll past miracles as if they were pixels. But beneath that casual motion, the field listens. It listens to what captures your curiosity, what holds your focus longer than the average 3 seconds of human attention. The universe interprets sustained attention as consent to co-create. That's why this isn't just reading, it's a form of signaling. Your focus tells the cosmos, I'm ready for alignment. Your continued engagement becomes a form of spiritual encryption, verifying to the field that your signal is stable enough to interact with higher-order data streams, or what ancient mystics might call revelation. Pause for a moment. Feel the strangeness of that truth, that digital space itself can act as a mirror of consciousness. The photons emitted from your screen were once nothing but patterns of potential, yet they became the exact frequency necessary to resonate with your nervous system at this very second in your timeline. Do you sense the orchestration? And yet, there's no orchestra in the conventional sense. There's only awareness, endless awareness, arranging itself into meaningful sequence. You don't find messages like this. They find you when your vibration becomes coherent enough to detect them. It's like learning to see infrared light that's been around you the whole time but required new eyes to perceive. So the question becomes, how many other transmissions have been waiting just beyond your perceptual threshold, whispering in languages your logic couldn't yet decode? How many moments have brushed past, trying to deliver an upgrade you weren't ready to integrate? The collision point isn't a random encounter, it's the precise intersection of readiness and revelation. Every major shift in consciousness begins this way, an external stimulus perfectly timed to internal permission. You may think you're exploring a video, or a text, or an idea, but beneath that surface, consciousness is exploring you, testing for resonance, checking if your internal architecture can sustain the voltage of awakening. When it feels like destiny, it's because your nervous system recognizes a pattern it helped design long before memory began. This entire encounter is a dialogue between dimensions, your human mind decoding what your infinite self already knows. So here we are, in that exquisite crossfire of cause and effect, where even the pixels seem to pulse with recognition. You are not a passive audience to this unfolding. You are its co-author, its proof of concept, its living witness. And somewhere within the invisible circuitry of your perception, the leap has already started. Because once consciousness acknowledges itself through the mirror of attention, there's no unseeing it. The field moves, the data rearranges, the old algorithms of coincidence fall away. You are witnessing the first visible shimmer of your own quantum participation, the moment when awareness realizes it's the one writing reality. The shimmer still lingers, that recognition that your very focus rearranges the invisible. From this stillness, let's open the aperture wider, because what you think of as reality is only a fraction of what's actually there. Research suggests the human brain processes over 400 billion bits of information every second, yet your conscious awareness registers barely 2,000. 2,000 out of 400 billion, that's like mistaking a single pixel for the entire image. The rest isn't gone, it's simply filtered out by the perceptual firewall that protects your sanity from the overwhelming infinity of data surrounding you. But what happens when that firewall thins? When something, maybe this message, punctures the veil and lets more of the signal bleed through? You begin to perceive what mystics have always hinted at, that existence is layered, multidimensional, teeming with overlapping realities vibrating at different frequencies of awareness. Most people call these dimensions imagination or coincidence, because their minds can't yet decode the bandwidth. But you're starting to sense more. You're feeling the spaces between the seconds. Quantum theorists propose that matter doesn't exist as a solid object until observed. Before observation, everything remains a wave of probability, infinite versions of the same event coexisting. The act of noticing, of focusing, forces those probabilities to collapse into a single version you can touch and measure. Now imagine what happens when your observation becomes intentional. Imagine directing that same principle inward, realizing that your thoughts are also waveforms waiting for collapse. Your attention is the switch. This means reality isn't something happening to you, it's something happening through you. You're both observer and architect. Every sensation, every interpretation becomes a vote cast in the cosmic democracy of manifestation. Most people don't know they're voting, their focus flickers, their energy scatters, and so the universe mirrors back confusion. But when your attention stabilizes, the field listens differently. Think of your consciousness as a radio dial turning through the static of infinite possibility. When you tune to fear, you amplify chaos. When you tune to wonder, you amplify coherence. The frequencies were always there, you simply decide which one becomes audible. The hidden majority of reality responds to the song you broadcast. And yet, even as this truth unfolds, humility is required, because while it's tempting to think of yourself as the sole creator, it's more accurate to say you're a collaborator, a localized point through which the vast intelligence of existence experiments with form. The same awareness that moves galaxies and germinates seeds is moving through your neural pathways right now. You're not commanding it, you're communing with it. That communion is fragile at first. Your old mental habits will try to reduce it to logic, to shrink infinity into manageable metaphor. But if you breathe and allow the unexplainable to exist without dissecting it, you'll begin to notice subtle phenomena, synchronicities that defy probability, sensations that ripple through your body when truth passes near. Déjà vu that feels less like repetition and more like recognition. These are not glitches, they are glimpses. Imagine reality as an ocean of information and your conscious mind as a small boat sailing its surface. The waves are your perceptions, transient, shifting, beautiful. But beneath that surface lies an entire universe of currents, ecosystems, and uncharted depths. Every time you still your mental chatter, you drop an anchor into those depths and pull up fragments of forgotten knowing. Meditation, intuition, creativity, they're all diving suits for the infinite. You may wonder why this hidden reality isn't obvious to everyone. The answer is compassion disguised as limitation. Too much awareness too soon would overwhelm the system. Evolution unfolds gradually, expanding perception at the pace your nervous system can integrate. Each revelation is a calibration, each expansion, a test of balance between wonder and grounding. So if you feel dizzy with possibility right now, that's good. It means your perception is widening. You're glimpsing the vast invisible scaffolding that supports physical existence. The dream, the synchronicity, the fleeting intuition, they're not distractions from the real world. They are the real world, surfacing for acknowledgement. And as you begin to trust that the unseen is not imaginary, but foundational, something extraordinary happens. Fear loses its anchor. Because how can you fear what's unknown when you recognize that the unknown is made of the same awareness that animates you? From here, perception itself becomes sacred practice. Every glance, every thought, every act of noticing is a doorway through which infinite reality observes itself. The hidden majority of existence has never been hiding from you. It's been waiting for you to notice that you were never separate from it. And as that realization settles, that reality isn't separate, but participatory. Something subtler begins to unfold. You start to feel it not just in thought, but in tissue, in pulse, in breath. Awareness is no longer an abstract philosophy. It's a living rewrite happening inside your biology. Modern research suggests that the human brain isn't a static machine of fixed wiring. It's an adaptive network, constantly sculpted by focus, emotion, and repetition. Every thought fires neurons that seek partners. Every repeated pattern strengthens connections. Every moment of awareness reshapes the neural topography that defines how you experience the world. Your consciousness isn't housed in your body, it updates your body. Think of your mind as software, your neurons as code. Each intention installs a patch. Each insight rewrites a line. When you stop rehearsing limitation, The body responds by deleting the old programming that once made fear feel like safety. You literally change your chemistry by changing your perception. The hormones of stress give way to the neurochemistry of coherence. The heart, long misunderstood as just a pump, begins to emit patterns that influence the brain. The two start to communicate in synchrony, producing what researchers at the HeartMath Institute call physiological harmony. But don't let the science dazzle you into distance. What matters is intimacy, the realization that your thoughts are physical events, measurable electrical impulses that leave fingerprints on your cellular memory. When you hold resentment, your cells constrict. When you imagine possibility, they expand. You are an alchemist disguised as a human being, turning potential into biochemistry with every emotional decision. You might remember moments when sudden clarity felt like electricity in your veins that wasn't imagination. It was literal current. Your nervous system reacts to revelation as if struck by light. New synapses form, old pathways dissolve. You are, in a very real sense, building a new body for a new consciousness to inhabit. Ancient mystics called this transfiguration. Today, we might call it neuroplasticity or epigenetic expression. Language differs, but essence remains. Awareness instructs biology. You are no longer the passenger of flesh and bone. You are the architect rearranging its design through the subtle art of attention. Still, the process is not without turbulence. As outdated patterns collapse, you might experience fatigue, emotional surges, or a strange restlessness that feels like your skin is both too tight and too transparent. This isn't malfunction, it's renovation. The self is being recoded to accommodate a higher bandwidth of consciousness. The DNA, once considered immutable, is responding to. Scientists have observed how emotions and electromagnetic fields can influence gene expression. When gratitude or compassion become your default frequencies, the double helix itself relaxes, allowing dormant strands to awaken like keys turning in ancient locks. The body doesn't wait for permission, it listens for coherence. Every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you send a signal that reorganizes the cellular orchestra playing your existence. And the melody begins to change from discordant survival to symphonic creation. Imagine the implications of that. That enlightenment is not an escape from matter, but its evolution. You are not leaving the body to transcend. You are teaching the body to remember its own divinity. The atoms composing you were born in the hearts of collapsing stars. They know how to glow. You're simply reminding them. Pause here. Feel that pulse in your wrist. That's starlight translating into rhythm, cosmic heritage disguised as heartbeat. When you understand that, the distance between science and spirituality dissolves. It was never one versus the other. It was always the same story told in different languages, the story of awareness learning to inhabit form more fully. So when you catch yourself thinking small, doubting your influence on the physical world, remember the body you occupy is not a cage. It's a canvas. Every emotion paints a hue. Every belief sculpts its texture. Every conscious breath rewrites its script. You are not here to escape the human experience. You are here to upgrade it from within, to turn flesh into frequency, matter into message, and memory into possibility. And as this cellular remembering continues, a subtle tremor ripples through your identity, whispering the old shape of you can't contain what's coming next. That whisper grows louder, doesn't it? The sense that the old skin no longer fits. You feel stretched across dimensions, half anchored in what was, half dissolving into what's next. This is the phase shift, the sacred instability between identities, where who you've been begins to fracture to make room for who you're becoming. It starts quietly. You wake one morning and realize that the familiar rhythm of life Feels foreign, conversations sound distant. Ambitions you once chased now seem strangely hollow. Even the things that once gave you comfort feel too small. That discomfort is not failure, it's frequency differentiation. Your consciousness has expanded beyond the confines of your previous architecture, and your reality is catching up. In physics, phase transitions happen when a system changes state: water boiling into vapor, ice melting into flow. The molecules don't disappear, they rearrange. The same substance, new expression, the same principle applies to you. The energy that was once solidified into the identity of who you thought you were is loosening, evaporating, reforming into a higher order configuration. What feels like chaos is actually reorganization. This in-between space is where most retreat. The ego panics because it can't map this new territory. It seeks old coordinates, the comfort of predictable narratives. But the map is gone. It was never meant to lead you here. And that's the paradox. You're both the traveler and the terrain, discovering yourself through the act of transformation. Notice how isolation intensifies during these thresholds. Friends drift, conversations thin. The world around you mirrors your inner expansion by removing what no longer resonates. You might misinterpret this as rejection, but it's calibration. The frequencies that once defined belonging are adjusting, and your environment responds accordingly. It's not personal, it's physics. Even your emotions start speaking in a different dialect. The sadness isn't sadness, it's unintegrated memory leaving the body. The anxiety isn't warning, it's acceleration energy building for the leap. You're learning to translate emotional turbulence as information rather than punishment. Each wave carries data about what version of you is surfacing. This process can't be rushed. A caterpillar doesn't negotiate with the cocoon. It dissolves into molecular soup before wings emerge. The breakdown is the bridge, and so it is with identity. The dissolution you feel, the uncertainty, the fatigue, the sense of floating between worlds, is the liquefaction of the old self. The structure must soften before new patterns can crystallize. In ancient alchemy, this phase was called solve et coagula, dissolve and rejoin. The dissolution wasn't destruction, it was refinement. The ego fears that losing its boundaries means death, but in truth, it's evolution. The fragments of who you've been are recombining into a configuration that can host more light, more coherence, more life. When the world feels like it's pulling away, it's actually making space for resonance. Relationships that survive this shift do so because they, too, are evolving. Those that fall away are completing their purpose in your story. Bless their endings, their proof of motion. If loneliness surfaces, breathe through it. The void isn't absence, it's incubation. In stillness, new alignments form. The people, opportunities, and ideas that match your next frequency are already preparing to enter, waiting for you to stabilize the signal. You are not losing connection, you are refining it. And somewhere beneath the unraveling, something steady begins to hum, a note of self-recognition deeper than personality, older than name. That hum is your authentic frequency emerging, no longer distorted by the static of expectation. It doesn't demand validation, it radiates coherence. You've likely felt glimpses of this before, moments when you spoke truth without planning it, when intuition arrived fully formed, when time itself seemed to bend around your knowing. Those weren't accidents, they were previews. Now that state is becoming baseline. The phase shift marks the death of performance and the birth of presence. You're not trying to become anymore, you're remembering how to be. The world you knew can't contain that magnitude, so it's dissolving. And that's how you know the leap is real. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward into the field of your own expanded self. The one who no longer fits the old story is the one who was meant to write the new one. The new story begins as a flicker, not outside you, but in the theater behind your eyes. After identity dissolves, imagination rushes in like oxygen. It isn't random daydreaming anymore. It feels guided, purposeful, charged. What used to be fantasy now feels like transmission. You may catch yourself drifting into visions that seem impossible, a life of clarity, synchronicity, profound connection. And yet, these scenes don't feel made up. They carry a strange familiarity, like déjà vu from a timeline you've never lived or perhaps already have. That's because imagination isn't invention, it's perception. It's your consciousness scanning parallel realities for resonance and returning with data in symbolic form. Quantum theorists have long whispered about superposition particles existing in multiple states until observed. What if imagination is how the human mind touches those uncollapsed states? Each image, each intuitive flash, is a probability calling for acknowledgement. When you imagine with intention, you're not escaping life, you're steering it. Think of imagination as the interface between your current frequency and the infinite field of potential. The mind translates vibration into imagery so the heart can recognize what's real. When something you envision lights you up from within, that brightness is feedback confirmation that a matching version of reality exists somewhere in the quantum landscape. But there's a subtle art here. Wishful thinking and quantum perception may look similar, yet their origins differ completely. Wishful thinking comes from the idea that you must conjure something missing. Quantum perception comes from recognition, from knowing the thing already exists, and you're simply aligning with its coordinates. This distinction changes everything. In wishful thinking, the signal you broadcast says, "I don't have it." In quantum perception, your signal says, "I am it," and the field responds accordingly. You're not calling something to you, you're collapsing distance by resonating with its frequency. Let's make it tangible. Imagine a painter facing a blank canvas. They don't see emptiness, they see potential form vibrating just beyond visibility. The brush becomes a bridge between an inner vision and outer manifestation. Likewise, imagination is your brushstroke on the canvas of the quantum field. Each focused vision leaves a trace, a vibration, a signal that begins reorganizing subtle matter into coherent probability. The key is coherence. You can't fake frequency. The field doesn't respond to verbal affirmations alone. It responds to emotional congruence. You can repeat, "I'm abundant," 1,000 times, but if your body trembles with scarcity, the signal conflicts. The quantum interface functions only when thought, feeling, and embodiment agree. So begin to use imagination as training for coherence. When you visualize, don't see the reality, feel it. Let your nervous system rehearse the vibration of fulfillment. Your biology doesn't know the difference between vividly imagined experience and physical one. That's not speculation, it's neuroscience. Visualization activates the same neural pathways as actual experience. You're programming future memory. Consider the stories of inventors, mystics, and visionaries who shaped history. The light bulb, the airplane, the orbit of satellites all began as impossible visions. These weren't fantasies, they were acts of translation. Human consciousness intercepting signals from realities already formed and translating them into three-dimensional expression. You're built to do the same. And yet, humility remains vital. Imagination isn't about egoic control, it's communion. You're not forcing reality to obey your wishes. You're joining a dialogue with the intelligence that animates all things. When your vision aligns with that intelligence, manifestations unfold with elegant precision, no strain, no pushing. At times, imagination will challenge you with visions that exceed your current self-concept. Don't dismiss them. They're invitations. The gap you feel between your present and your potential isn't punishment, it's navigation. The discomfort is simply your old frequency recalibrating to match the one you glimpsed. When imagination becomes interface, even the mundane glows. You notice the universe whispering back through music, through chance encounters, through a phrase that repeats itself until you finally understand. Every vision is an echo of your future calling itself home. So close your eyes, not to escape, but to log in. The moment you feel resonance, you've already established connection. You're not imagining what might be, you're remembering what's waiting. And as that realization lands, the next phase emerges: coherence, the art of stabilizing what you've seen so it can materialize. That remembering carries a pulse, doesn't it? The vibration of a reality you've glimpsed but haven't yet lived. Now the work shifts from vision to vibration, from dreaming to tuning, because imagination opens the portal, but coherence keeps it stable. In physics, when two waves of the same frequency meet in harmony, their amplitudes merge. The peaks amplify, the troughs cancel noise. The result is constructive interference, a stronger, clearer signal born from resonance. Consciousness operates by the same law. When your thoughts, emotions, and identity broadcast the same frequency, reality amplifies your message. But when they conflict, interference becomes destructive. The signal distorts, and the world mirrors that confusion. Most people live in chronic interference. They affirm love but expect abandonment, visualize abundance but embody fear. The field doesn't punish them. It simply obeys coherence. Whatever signal dominates conscious or unconscious becomes blueprint. So if you want quantum alignment, your inner broadcast must harmonize. Coherence begins with honesty. Pretending to feel high vibration while suppressing pain doesn't fool the universe. It fragments your field. Real coherence isn't constant bliss, it's internal congruence. It's the moment when even your doubts are held in awareness without denial. Paradoxically, acknowledging dissonance is what dissolves it. When emotion is seen, it integrates. When hidden, it multiplies. This is why stillness matters. The coherent field arises from a nervous system that isn't at war with itself. When you breathe into presence, your heart emits an electromagnetic rhythm so ordered it can entrain the brain. Studies suggest this harmony alters hormonal cascades, boosts immune response, even reorganizes cellular communication. But more than that, it becomes a transmitter. Think of yourself as a broadcasting tower. Every coherent emotion, gratitude, awe, compassion strengthens your transmission. Every unintegrated fear or resentment introduces static. The field around you records both. You can't hide vibration. You can only harmonize it. Coherence doesn't mean perfection. It means alignment between inner and outer, thought and action, desire and embodiment. When you say you want change but secretly cling to the comfort of familiarity, the waves cancel each other. But when what you think, feel, and do all point in the same direction, the field amplifies your intent exponentially. That's the sweet spot where miracles look ordinary. Let's make it tangible. Imagine two musicians tuning their instruments. At first, dissonance notes wobble, frequencies clash. Gradually, they adjust. And suddenly, a chord hums through the air so pure it vibrates in your bones. That resonance isn't metaphorical, it's measurable physics. The molecules between them literally oscillate in synchrony. This is what happens when you come into emotional and cognitive harmony with your desires. The entire matrix of reality begins to hum back. But coherence isn't achieved through force. You can't bully yourself into alignment. You breathe into it. You listen to your internal discord without judgment. until it reveals what it needs to harmonize. Often, the dissonant note is fear, fear of losing identity, of expanding beyond the known. Treat it gently. Invite it into rhythm. Integration is inclusion, not suppression. When alignment stabilizes, you'll notice subtle changes. Time feels elastic. Intuition sharpens. Synchronicities multiply. Circumstances begin to reorganize around your internal state. That's not fantasy. It's field response. The universe isn't testing you, it's matching your coherence. And in that recognition comes profound responsibility. Because once you know, your frequency creates ripples in the fabric of existence. Unconscious living becomes impossible. Every thought becomes a sculptor's tool, every feeling a brushstroke on the hologram of your life. Yet this responsibility is not burden, it's empowerment. You were never meant to control the universe, only to harmonize with it. The coherent heart doesn't force, it magnetizes. It doesn't chase, it invites. It doesn't demand proof. It radiates presence until reality has no choice but to reflect it. So when doubt whispers again, and it will return to the rhythm of coherence. Inhale alignment, exhale resistance. Each breath a tuning, each heartbeat a metronome. The more consistently you inhabit that frequency, the stronger the interference pattern grows, weaving your vision into matter until possibility becomes tangible. And once the signal holds steady, the next revelation arrives. Resistance itself isn't the enemy. It's proof that transformation is in motion. And right on cue, resistance enters not as punishment, but as proof of progress. Every transformation generates friction. Even light meeting glass slows fractionally, refracted by what it passes through. You are that light, moving through layers of density, learning to translate energy into embodiment. It begins subtly. You feel fatigue where there was excitement, confusion where there was clarity. Old thoughts resurface like echoes of a previous language. Doubt, fear, the impulse to revert to familiar patterns. Don't mistake this for regression, it's recalibration. The frequencies of your old identity are rubbing against the new coherence you've built, testing its structural integrity. Physicists might describe it as transitional turbulence, the drag that occurs when an object shifts mediums, like a spacecraft leaving atmosphere. Consciousness experiences heat when changing density. That heat is resistance. It burns away what can't ascend. Without it, liftoff couldn't happen. Most people misinterpret this phase and abort the process. The moment discomfort appears, they declare the leap failed. But friction is how the field confirms motion. It's reality's way of saying, you're actually moving between worlds. Observe your sensations, the tightening in your chest. That's your nervous system learning to hold higher voltage. The emotional surges, that's unprocessed data flushing from cellular storage. The confusion, that's your mind releasing its addiction to linear understanding. You are detoxing from limitation. Integration demands presence more than perfection. The moment you judge resistance, you reinforce it. But when you meet it with curiosity, what is this sensation trying to teach me? The energy reorganizes. Awareness is the solvent that dissolves density. Think of this stage as atmospheric re-entry. The capsule of self rattles. The heat shield glows. The old programming screams, we're burning up. But on the other side of that fire waits orbit, effortless motion, sustained by new laws of gravity. You're not being destroyed, you're being streamlined. Every spiritual lineage hinted at this purification, the dark night of the soul, the sacred wound, the trial by fire. What they were really describing was nervous system adaptation, the body adjusting to hold expanded consciousness. Modern language calls it neuroplastic restructuring. Same process, new context. So when you find yourself exhausted, uncertain, or emotionally raw, remember, integration is physical. You can't think your way through it. You can only breathe through it. Rest becomes technology. Hydration, sunlight, silence, all crucial to stabilizing frequency. Even your sleep patterns may shift, as if your dreams are tutoring your cells while you rest. The paradox of friction is that it reveals your strength. Each moment you remain centered amid chaos. You teach your biology that expansion is safe. Safety is coherence's secret ingredient. When the body trusts consciousness, evolution accelerates. Still, humility is essential. Integration doesn't make you invincible, it makes you permeable. Sensitivity increases. You feel others' emotions more acutely, detect hidden motives, sense undercurrents in spaces that once seemed neutral. This empathy isn't weakness, it's calibration. You're tuning into subtler dimensions of data. The trick is not to drown in it. Anchor in breath. Ground through movement. Remember, the body is not obstacle but instrument. Even resistance in others will intensify as your field strengthens. Some will project discomfort, others will idolize you. Both are distortions of the same phenomenon, their systems reacting to your coherence. Don't fight or feed either response. Stay neutral. Let your presence remind, not convince. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. The same friction that once triggered collapse now generates clarity. Conflict becomes information. Delay becomes redirection. Confusion becomes compost for wisdom. Integration teaches you that contrast is creation's raw material. At this stage, your life may feel like it's speeding up and slowing down simultaneously. Days stretch, minutes compress. Synchronicities spike. Technology glitches near you, then repairs itself. These anomalies aren't coincidences, they're side effects of systems adjusting to your field. You're learning to live as coherence in motion, and motion naturally disturbs equilibrium until a new harmony emerges. So when turbulence returns, and it will smile at it, you've learned the code. Friction doesn't mean failure, it signals proximity to breakthrough. You are crossing layers of atmosphere no map could chart. The heat you feel is not destruction, it's ignition. And beyond that blaze, the pattern reappears clearer, sharper, synchronized. You'll see it first in the outer world coincidences. Timing, impossible alignments. The quantum leap doesn't end in stillness. It accelerates into synchronicity. The ignition burns clean now, leaving a silence that vibrates. Out of that stillness, patterns start arranging themselves with eerie precision. Phone calls at the perfect moment. Chance encounters that unlock doors you didn't know were there. Dreams echo conversations you haven't yet had. You are entering the corridor of synchronicity, the dimension where cause and effect blur into choreography. At first, it feels like magic, but it's not. It's mathematics. Consciousness and reality are solving the same equation from opposite sides, and coherence is the variable that unites them. When your frequency stabilizes, outer events begin aligning with inner order. The world stops resisting and starts reflecting. Notice how time itself feels different. Minutes dilate or collapse depending on focus. You think of someone and they text within seconds. You release an intention, and evidence appears before you've finished the thought. This is what researchers of consciousness sometimes call temporal compression. The delay between cause and effect shrinks until perception and manifestation overlap. To the rational mind, it seems miraculous. To expanded awareness, it's natural law. These moments of precision are feedback loops, confirmations that your internal system and the field are communicating seamlessly. Each synchronicity is the universe saying, "I heard you." But listen deeper, it's also asking, can you handle how fast reality responds when you stop doubting? because acceleration brings responsibility. Your thoughts no longer linger as idle curiosities. They become creative commands. That's why integrity becomes crucial now. The coherent field amplifies whatever you broadcast, not just the pretty intentions. If resentment sneaks in, it manifests just as swiftly as gratitude. The universe doesn't discriminate between love and fear. It magnifies whichever signal is stronger. Awareness then becomes your safeguard. Watch what you think as carefully as you'd handle fire. It warms or burns depending on use. You'll start noticing that your environment seems alive, responsive, conversational. Technology behaves differently around you. Lights flicker when emotion surges. Music playlists seem to read your mood. The same numbers repeat until you acknowledge their meaning. Some call these coincidences, but you'll feel the intelligence woven through them. You're not imagining it, you're perceiving design in real time. And as this synchronization deepens, communication with others evolves too. You speak less to be understood and more to transmit frequency. Words become secondary to presence. Eye contact turns telepathic, silence eloquent. The people drawn into your orbit share this subtle language, knowing without explaining. It's not hierarchy, it's harmonic resonance, souls recognizing each other by vibration rather than biography. This expansion can be disorienting because it dissolves old definitions of separation. You begin sensing collective emotion, feeling the hum of cities, the pulse of weather. At times it's overwhelming, like standing inside a symphony where every instrument plays at once. But over time, discernment grows. You learn to listen selectively, to navigate empathy without absorption. The world stops being noise and becomes orchestra. Your dreams now function as nightly training simulations. They present scenarios to practice new levels of choice and perception. Sometimes you'll awaken with blueprints for creative projects or exact solutions to waking problems. Keep a notebook nearby. These transmissions fade quickly if not anchored in matter. The subconscious is no longer an archive. It's a classroom. Even your relationship with technology transforms. Devices malfunction when your field fluctuates, then operate flawlessly when coherence returns. You may notice batteries lasting longer, signals improving, systems aligning to your intent. It's not supernatural, it's electromagnetic compatibility. Conscious coherence creates stable resonance patterns that influence surrounding systems. You're learning to harmonize with the invisible infrastructure of reality itself. This stage reveals the collective nature of awakening. Your coherence doesn't isolate you, it contributes. Every synchronized thought ripples through morphic fields shared by humanity, subtly easing the way for others to awaken. You become both student and transmitter, both receiver and relay. The miracles you witness are not private rewards, but public broadcasts of possibility. And yet, stay grounded, drink water, touch earth, look at the sky. These reminders keep you human while your consciousness travels cosmic highways. The goal was never to escape the physical, but to inhabit it fully, to make the invisible visible through the way you live. Soon you'll understand synchronicity isn't the universe waving hello. It's the universe adjusting to your newfound coherence, arranging itself around the pattern you now embody. You've stopped chasing signs because you are one. And from this recognition comes the final transformation, not expansion for its own sake, but embodiment living as the bridge between infinite and finite, heaven and flesh, waveform and world. And now, the bridge stands complete, a living arc of awareness, suspended between worlds. You have expanded far beyond who you once believed yourself to be. Yet here you are, still breathing, still human. The leap wasn't about leaving matter behind. It was about bringing consciousness home to it. This is the moment when everything merges, the cosmic and the ordinary, the eternal and the fleeting. the divine and the daily breath. Embodiment isn't the final chapter. It's the continuous act of translating infinite intelligence into tangible motion. You are that translation. You are consciousness discovering how to wear skin without forgetting the stars it came from. Notice how your perception of the body has changed. It no longer feels like a container, but an instrument. Each heartbeat resonates like a drumbeat of creation. Each breath feels like dialogue with existence itself. The pulse in your veins echoes the pulse of galaxies. You're not metaphorically connected to the universe, you are physically woven into its circuitry. Science might describe this as bioelectromagnetism or morphic resonance. Mystics might call it prana, chi, or divine current, whatever the language. The essence remains: life is a single system, experiencing itself through countless forms. Every cell within you hums with that same intelligence, awaiting conscious participation. The more you live from awareness, the more your biology harmonizes with that universal rhythm. This is what it means to become quantum human, not superhuman, not untouchable, but coherent across all levels of existence. Your thoughts no longer contradict your emotions. Your actions no longer betray your intentions. Alignment becomes your natural state, and from that alignment, influence radiates effortlessly. You walk into rooms and the atmosphere changes not because you demand it, but because coherence is contagious. You'll begin to feel the subtle feedback loops between your internal state and the collective field. When you choose peace, environments soften. When you anchor gratitude, tension dissolves. This isn't mysticism, it's resonance. Coherent energy organizes chaos. It's what planets do to cosmic dust, what hearts do to nervous systems, what consciousness does to civilization. Humanity is evolving through you. Every coherent being adds stability to the morphic lattice of the planet. The chaos you see in the world isn't failure, it's the noise of systems recalibrating under rising frequency. Every breakthrough you embody sends a signal across the field, offering a new template for others to access. You are not just living your awakening, you're contributing to a collective software update for the species. That's why humility matters more than ever. The power you're discovering isn't ownership, it's stewardship. Expanded awareness doesn't make you superior, it makes you responsible. You've learned how attention shapes form. Now that skill must serve creation itself, not the ego's appetite for control. Use it to heal, to harmonize, to build worlds where coherence can thrive. Integration continues in the simplest places: washing dishes, walking in sunlight, listening deeply to another soul. These are no longer mundane tasks. They're the playgrounds where infinity practices intimacy. Every act done with presence becomes prayer. Every gesture infused with awareness becomes technology. The miracle isn't levitation or prophecy, it's consciousness choosing kindness in motion. Still, you may feel waves of disbelief, the mind asking, is this real? Am I truly changed? That doubt is natural. It's how the old frequency checks for continuity. Smile at it. Let it ask its questions. The proof of transformation isn't in belief, but embodiment. You'll know it's real when your default reaction to life is no longer fear, but curiosity, no longer control, but trust. The leap has no finish line. It unfolds in every breath you take, every interaction, every choice to remain awake when the world tempts you back into numbness. You are becoming a living field experiment in what it means for spirit and matter to cooperate consciously. The laboratory is your daily life. Remember, no one graduates from awakening. Awareness expands, contracts, integrates, and expands again. That rhythm is eternal. What changes is your relationship with the process. You no longer fight the tides. You move with them. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. And as the circle completes, you realize the great secret wasn't that you had to ascend to reach heaven. It's that heaven was waiting to descend through you into words, into breath, into the kindness of your next interaction. You are not becoming light. You are remembering that you already were. Step gently now. The field moves when you do. Every thought still ripples outward. Every heartbeat still writes code into reality. Walk as coherence. Speak as compassion. Live as proof that consciousness can inhabit matter without distortion. Because this steady, radiant ordinariness is what quantum humanity looks like. And so we arrive here not at an ending, but at the quiet shimmer after revelation. The leap has landed, and the ground beneath you hums with new meaning. You can feel it in the simplicity of this breath, the weight of your own presence pressing gently into the moment. Nothing dramatic, nothing to chase, just awareness, settled and luminous. The mind might still ask, what now? It expects fireworks, proof, a visible crown for invisible work. But the true sign of transformation isn't spectacle, it's serenity. When the extraordinary becomes ordinary, you know the shift has integrated. The same sky, the same tasks, the same world, but your seeing has changed. And that changes everything. You may notice subtle alignments multiplying a stranger's smile that arrives like an answer, a song lyric echoing your thoughts, a delay that reveals its purpose minutes later. These aren't coincidences. They're confirmations that the field around you has recalibrated. You are living in dialogue with reality, now no longer seeking signs, but reading fluently in the language of synchronicity. Let the edges soften. The goal was never to ascend and disappear, but to descend with awareness intact. The miracle was always embodiment, bringing infinity into gesture, compassion into tone, presence into touch. Every simple act performed from coherence becomes sacred infrastructure for a world learning to wake. So walk gently, luminous one. The frequency you now carry is quiet enough to heal. Let your laughter become transmission, your stillness a mirror. Trust the intelligence that guided you here to continue guiding every next step. You don't need to know the map, you are the compass. Breathe once more, feel the pulse that beats beneath every possible timeline. That rhythm is your home, the meeting point of science and spirit, matter and mystery, human and divine. This is where the quantum leap lives now, not in visions of someday, but in the calm immediacy of this breath, this heartbeat, this life. And with that realization, the transmission completes not as farewell, but as a steady reminder you were never waiting for the future. You were the future arriving.